Alright guys, so I'm going to start a new series here now that I'm 41 and I've been in the iron game a long time, and we're going to call it Fitness Over 40. And today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about why doing pause work with low reps is going to be very, very beneficial to middle-aged lifters for a number of reasons. Now, one of the things that you need to remember when you really listen to people out there who have large amounts of experience working with lifters in a wide variety of age categories, people like the starting strength guys, even another guy I've heard called Mike Matthews, a lot of other people out there who have noted that as lifters become middle age and older age, that dealing with high volume training with lighter weight becomes increasingly difficult to recover from, causes increasing amounts of DOMS and soreness and things like that. And this kind of flies in the face of what a lot of people will tell you. You go look at certain bodybuilders out there who will tell you, no, you just need to do partial reps and lightweight for high reps as you get older so that you don't get hurt. And that's actually really the opposite of what you should be doing. I mean, what comes to mind is someone like Cali Muscle does that. But people need to remember this is also someone who uses mind-boggling amounts of anabolic substances to help with his recovery. So you need to understand that someone like that really has both a genetic predisposition to look like he looks, and he uses a lot of drugs to recover from this. It's not going to be suitable for a 45-year-old natty or someone who's 45 or 50 just on TRT. What has been noted by a lot of coaches over the years, and I'm giving credit where credit is due. This is something that you hear a lot out of the starting strength guys, and they're dead on accurate, because I've observed that over the years too, is that as you get older, high reps make you more sore. High reps make it harder to recover, and the more sore you are, the worse your performance suffers workout to workout, and just your quality of life degrades. But higher intensity, meaning lower reps, higher weights, seem to do okay. They seem to be easier to recover from in comparison as you get older. But one of the big concerns you have with older lifters is that fear of heavy weight, that fear of low reps, because their concern is, look, I'm older, I'm going to be more injury prone. But what they need to understand is those injuries tend to relate more to mobility problems, connective tissue health, these things that regenerate a little slower as we get older. They can start to interfere with our ability to train as maximally as we might like. But the thing is that you need to remember is that if you've built up gradually and your technique is good and your mobility is good and you've given your connective tissue sufficient recovery, this isn't a real concern. And what you also need to remember is that heavy is a very relative term. In other words, a weight that you can only lift for about 5 reps before your form breaks down or before you fail is fairly heavy. And that doesn't matter if for you that's 100 pounds and it's 500 pounds for someone else. It's equally heavy as far as you're concerned. So heavy is very, very relative. And, that's going to depend upon your work capacity, your strength. And what you need to understand is that as you build up over time, your connective tissue adapts to handle these workloads. Your bone density adapts to handle these workloads. It just does it a little slower as we get older, but it still adapts. And you have to remember there are guys out there who are middle-aged and older who lift brutally heavy weight injury-free. There are plenty of them out there. They do exist. But the thing is that your real concern is going to be loss of mobility that contributes to an injury with a heavy weight, as well as form degradation. And this is where things like pause work really comes into play. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. And the reason I say that is that if you pause on most exercises, you create additional mobility, meaning you're having to stop the weight at a dead stop on one of the terminal ends of the exercise. All right, that puts you in a position to where you're training that exercise sometimes under stretch. You always have control and you're pausing at one of the terminal ends. Well, that increases the joint mobility on that exercise, and it creates strength mobility, like an actual strength in the terminal ranges of motion. Well, if you've done that and you've conditioned your body to do that repeatedly with moderately heavy weights, your mobility increases, your chances of injury dramatically reduce. Also, because it forces you to control the weight at all times, you are less likely to have form breakdown because you're not going to get stuck as often, in the middle and something breaks down, you slip out of your bar path. You're going to tend to get stuck right there where you pause. Well, again, that's going to dramatically reduce the chances of tearing a tendon, right? Because you've already kind of got the lift where it's going to be. You've got it in a range of motion that you're used to handling weight in all the time, right there on the terminal end, and you have it under control. And if you can't accelerate the weight, you're going to tend to not really be able to get it moving if something goes wrong. So therefore, again, your injury rate's going to be much, much lower, less likely of tearing connective tissue, and your joints themselves get stronger, because you need to remember, full range of motion loaded training with moderate weights, moderately heavy weights that you are able to control, tend to improve joint health over time. And by pausing on exercises, you don't get that sharp, abrupt micro tearing, the things that cause additional micro tearing in connective tissue, or additional stretching or pulling on muscles through a range of motion they might not be used to. They tend to go away when you pause. And what do I mean? Exercises where you reset on the floor on every rep and you can pull all the slack out. All of your pressing, when you pause and stop on your chest and hold it there for a second or a half second, you start to remove a lot of these concerns. In other words, touch and go or bouncing on a bench press. That's how you tend to tear pectorals. It's these bouncing of exercises. But if you reset everything and come to a pause, it removes a lot of these concerns and it improves joint health. And examples of this would be pause squats, where you pause down to where your comfortable depth is, whether it's parallel, slightly below parallel, ass-to-grass, wherever you can maintain tension without pain. You squat down to that depth and you hold it for a brief second, and then pause and then squat up. Deadlift, you put the bar completely on the floor, not a Romanian deadlift that stretches the hamstrings, but a complete reset on the floor. A Pendlay row, to where again you pull tight, you pull the slack out, and then you row off the floor and set it back down on each rep without cheating, without using a bunch of hip drive to move the weight. Bench pressing, to where you bring the bar down and you pause on your chest on every rep. Overhead pressing, where you bring the barbell down and you pause on the top of your chest with each rep. This is what I mean by pause work. These are just a few examples. There's a lot of others, but exercises in which you have the ability to bring the weight to a controlled stop and then accelerate it from a dead stop, usually at the terminal end of the range of motion, or by something that is physically blocking the weight from going further. It's a very low injury way to train, and it's easier on your joints, it's easier on your connective tissue. And now here's the kicker. When it comes to intensity, any exercise where you pause from a dead stop and have to accelerate a weight from a dead stop is harder. In other words, it's all about relative intensity. Doing workloads, whether it's 7 sets of 3 or 5 sets of 5 or whatever it happens to be, working at what your percentages are of your maximum is what's going to give you strength. And it's total work done, and again, that's relative work done to your strength level, so it's going to determine hypertrophy. Well, your strength gains, what you're going to find is that if you have an exercise where you come to a dead stop, your 5 rep max is still going to give you the strength and the strength carryover of training with a heavy 5 rep set at 85% of your max, 85% of your maximum intensity. The pauses force you to use a slightly lighter weight, because you're having to accelerate the weight through the hardest part of the exercise. Usually from a stop, you get superior muscle fiber recruitment on every rep with a slightly lighter weight. In other words, sometimes your 300-pound squat, you might be able to only do 280 with the pause at the bottom, but the muscle fiber recruitment is equal to the 300. So therefore you end up loading a little less weight on yourself while training with higher intensities to get better strength carryover. So again, this is a system of training or something that you can use a lot of with pause work to recover easier, get less soreness, reduce chances of joint problems, improve joint health, reduce chances of connective tissue tearing. That's overall in some ways easier to recover from, because it lets you get the same amount of intensity compared to your relative strength, with sometimes a little less weight pressing down on your spine, a little less weight pressing down on your wrists. So you get one of the perks of using slightly lighter weights, and that's a little less compressive force on you, but you're getting superior muscle fiber recruitment. And because, again, you tend to pause, you're going to find that training this way, even sometimes when it forces you to reduce weight, is going to give you better carryover. And therefore, because of all of this, it's my opinion that lifters over the age of 40 would do well to do the majority of their training, or at least a lot of their training, doing pause reps. I think they're going to find it easier to recover from. It's going to allow them to get stronger and bigger faster with less interference with recovery, less soreness, less of all these problems that we're concerned with when lifting heavy weight. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.